Happy Friday, everybody. Friday starts the weekend, and we are here to make your weekend a profitable one through the props betting market. Welcome to Prop It Up. I am Andy Lang from WagerTalk.com. Joining me, as always, my fellow prop masters, Matt Josephs from SportsMemo.com, Andrew McGinnis from WagerTalk.com. We're going to go over three more running backs as we get closer and closer to NFL season. We're going to break down their season rushing totals and whether we liked over the unders. We got our best bet at the end of the show. We'll also take a look at some MLB props, some UFC props, and some CFL props, which Andrew continues to cash in on the CFL. So can't wait to get to that. So, gentlemen, let's get into our first running back that we're going to talk about. And great job from the people in the chat room. You guys suggested that we break down Jonathan Taylor. If you want us to break down a player for next week's show, just put it in the comments. Don't put it in the chat. Wait till the show's over. Put it down in the chat. It could be any position. Just let us know who you want us to break down. We're going to be breaking down a couple players every week. So, Matt, coming to you, my Indianapolis Colts and Jonathan Taylor. What spoke out to you when you were looking up this prop? It's a big number. We're looking at over 1,100 yards for him. What do you see in Jonathan Taylor this year?
Yeah, and just to kind of, since I'm the one who also looks at some of the other books, BetMGM is also offering, because we use the DraftKings numbers, BetMGM is offering the same number as well. So there is a pretty nice thing out in the market for him. And look, when I'm looking at these props, I don't look at the top end of the market. It's funny. It's like this with win totals. It's like this with some of the other stuff. Like, I don't look at the top end because, look, 1,150 yards, as you just said, is a lot of yardage. And last year he went well under this. The year before he went well over this. And injuries play a factor. And that running backs get injured more than others. So plain simple, Andy, I don't really have a thought as much on this one. I think he's going to have a solid season. But, I mean, look, if the Colts start throwing the ball a little bit, you think they're going to protect their quarterback by running the ball a little bit more, but that means Taylor could get injured more. So this isn't a type of player that I'm going to be more interested in. Some of the other guys that we talk about today are the ones that I'll take a better stance on. But these high-end guys, Andy, I'm not really as interested because they're going to do good, but are they going to do good enough?
Yeah, these are the I love the higher number ones. Spoiler, mostly because I like the unders. All it takes is one little injury. Guy misses a couple weeks, and there's no shot that he gets to a big number. Andrew, what'd you find out about Jonathan Taylor when you looked him up?
Yeah, I mean, I just look at utilization, right? Like how much I expect somebody to be used. It's not really as much about the performance. I think all three of us would agree if he's given the opportunity and given the ball enough, he's going to go over this number. But you guys talk about injuries. And I mean, look, let's be frank here. Somebody has to say it. We're here in June talking about this prop, right? So it's like a lot of people always say if you're betting these season-long props ahead of time, the only way you can go, right, the only thing that can happen is somebody could get hurt or, something could happen in training camp where they say he's going to get less reps or different things like that. Chances are someone's not going to get that much better. So the reason why you would take something early like this is because of things like that, getting ahead and seeing these big numbers. And like you just said, Andy, you like taking the unders on these. So we saw 1 year with Jonathan Taylor get run into the ground. The next year, injuries were a problem and utilization was a little bit down. And I'm going to go under this number. I actually might be surprise you guys with this a little bit. I think I might be taking his receptions props a little bit more moving forward. I think he could catch the ball a little bit more. They could kind of just like do a little more dink and dunking with this team. And realistically, when I look at the Colts, I think that as much as we want to see this team just dominantly run the ball, is that really the best option for Jonathan Taylor? Is that what they really need to do to be successful? I think we saw that. It's great for fantasy owners, but I'm putting my mind and putting myself in the owner's shoes and the GM and the coaches, and I just don't think it makes the team better if they're running this guy to the ground, making their plays predictable, and, risking injury to a young player. Andy, look at what's going on right now to running backs. Like for the past 5 to 10 years, running backs aren't getting paid as much. They're not getting re-signed as we expect them to. I mean, we saw it. We're seeing it already this year. The security of some of these running backs is not there as some other star players. And I think a lot of that is teams running them to the ground. So we'll see what happens. But I want to make it clear that when we take an under on a player like this, we're not saying they're going to have a bad year. We're just saying they might not be used enough or put in the position to go over this number. And I'm sure you agree with that. We're not saying, yeah, this guy's going to suck just because we like the under. I just don't think he'll get as many opportunities to go over this number.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, listen, if you owned Jonathan Taylor in fantasy football last year, I think you would have said he did suck. It was a disaster year. I I guess when I look at last year, you go, well, it can't get any worse. But I'm looking at this Colts team. So you got a rookie quarterback. That situation is murky at best. I'm not sure if he's even going to be starting our draft pick. I don't know if he's going to start as quarterback. The offensive line has a lot of holes and a lot of health questions. They were a massive disappointment last year. We're thin anyways, so even if we do have an injury, it's not like we have a lot of guys that you can plug in and not miss a beat. And Jonathan Taylor had ankle surgery in January. Thank God he did it right after the season was over, so he has plenty of time to heal. But that's a big injury. That's his first real big one that he's going to have to navigate through. So he had 861 yards rushing last season, and this jumped off the page for me. So of those 861 yards, 161 came against the Houston Texans in an overtime game. And then 147 came against Las Vegas. So that's over 300 yards of his 861. Those were his only 200-plus rushing games. Houston has a defensive coach now, D'Amico Ryans, so there's no way Houston's going to be, worse or even the same as as their rush defense was last year. I think they're going to be better. And the Colts kind of have a tougher defense for their run. I mean, they don't get Las Vegas. They do have Houston, but then they're at Baltimore. Tennessee's rush defense is always pretty good. Cleveland's rush defense was good. New Orleans was good. New England has got a stacked defense this year. They get Tampa. They get Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. I lied. They do get Las Vegas in the second to last game of the year. But this, even if he does stay healthy, this schedule is full of pretty tough rush defenses, and I'm not sure he gets there. I think they take it easy on him to start the year if his ankle isn't quite maybe 100%, or if they know that this year they don't have championship aspirations. For the three guys that we're going to talk about today, Jonathan Taylor under is going to be my favorite one. That might even be a client play. But yeah, Jonathan Taylor under 1,150 and a half yards is how I will go on this one. I don't trust this Colts team. So next running back we're going to talk about here, Matt, talk about another injury guy coming off of an injury, Breece Hall. Man, he showed so much potential last year. Bummer he gets the ACL injury. We have his over-under number at 875 and a half. Curious number. We got Aaron Rodgers here at the Jets. What do you think about Breece Hall this year?
Yeah, there's so many things to consider here. I mean, first off, the Aaron Rodgers thing, you don't go and bring Aaron Rodgers in to have him handing the ball off a ton. So that's something you certainly consider. And you look at the depth chart right now for the Jets running back. You've got Breece Hall, who, they're all saying the right things. He's going to be ready by week one, and he's saying all the right things. And he's like, look, I'm not rushing for week one. I'm going to be ready when I'm ready. So this is not going to be one of those RG3 all in for week one situations when he was with Washington. And then you look at the depth chart. You got Michael Carter. You've got Israel Abanikanda, who is the running back who used to be at Pitt. There's another guy behind him, Zonovan Knight, who they kind of sort of like. And then Dalvin Cook is hanging out there. And the Jets are interested in Dalvin Cook. And the longer that Dalvin waits, the more I think the Jets could be interested and they could link up here. I think, and much like what Andrew said for Jonathan Taylor, I think I'm be interested in Breece Hall receptions. We know Aaron Rodgers loves throwing to the running backs. We know that this team loves throwing to the running backs as well. He had a 34.4% target rate as a running back last year. That was huge. If you look at his carry numbers last year, because obviously he had the injury, he had 3 games where he had 18, 19, and 20 carries, and then he had single digits in the other ones. I don't think we're going to see 20 carries a game for him this season, especially coming off the ACL, especially with him being in his second year. I think I lean to the under here, but I also think there'll be weeks where I'm definitely hammering his receptions over, his receiving yards over, because I think they're going to try and use him in creative ways to get him out from just running in between the tackles.
Andrew, Breece Hall, New York Jets. What do you think about his chances of getting over 875 and a half?
Yeah, so Hall, there's so many things to say, of course, the Rodgers stuff, but Matt already mentioned that. I mean, they're not going to bring him over to just have him not throw the ball a lot. But I think that's kind of people are talking about that too much. They're obviously going to have to hand the ball and utilize the guys that they have. But I noticed one thing I really like about running backs. These are stats, of course, all just before he got injured. He was 4th ranked in running backs for yards after contact. And I think when anybody's looking at running back props, you want to be able to see a guy take some contact and slip out of it. That's what really makes a talented running back. And also, like Matt alluded to, he was 4th ranked among running backs as far as receiving yards and target rate. So this is a guy that, look at what was going on in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. He had a lot of running backs that he was just tossing these 3-4 yard balls to and letting them go to work. And like Matt said, I think that could be the case here with him. He's built for it. He's proven it. And he got a lot of targets. He made something out of a lot of those catches. So I'm kind of skeptical here. I can't make a strong opinion, but I would lean towards the under on this one. I'm actually not worried about his health. I'm worried about the fact that we picked a lot of injured guys to talk about today. But when I look at this one overall, I'd go towards the under. I guess for the second straight time, I'm looking at a running back, but I'm more interested in playing their receiving yards. So I know I'm supposed to give you an under over for this, Andy, but what I will say is I will be interested in looking at some reception props for Breece Hall.
Yeah, we talked about the running back as a position. I mean, I feel like most of these guys are going to have an injury concern. Like, pick a running back. It's like, oh, he's old. Oh, he's hurt. I feel like this is kind of just the position as a whole. I think Breece Hall is the toughest one out of the 3 that we have this week. If I'm playing anything, it's an under. Just coming back from the ACL injury, I know he's young. And I know he's, the medicine and the surgeries are incredible. And I don't doubt that he's going to have a pretty productive season. But I think it gets off to an early start. There's a big difference between getting ready in training camp and then getting hit around your knees. I caveat, I'm certainly not comparing myself to professional athletes. I've had 3 reconstructive knee surgeries. And I'm telling you, you're nervous about it. It's in the back of your head. That is something that you just don't really talk about when you're hearing guys come for ACL surgery. The first time a guy goes after his legs, the first time he gets drilled. And even if you're okay, like on your feet and you have a really good game, man, it takes longer to recover. It just does after ACL surgeries. I mean, it's at least a year before you're back to even somewhat normal, and you're never going to be 100% before your surgery. You can get close, but you're never going to be 100%. I just think that he gets off to a tough start. And Matt, you brought up Michael Carter. You know how Aaron Rodgers is. If there's a guy that's working for him in the offense, Aaron Rodgers is just going to say, I want that guy. So if Michael Carter gets off to a good start, that's your starting running back for the Jets until Aaron Rodgers says otherwise. So it's a tough one. I can't say for certain that this is a must bet or anything, but I definitely lean towards the under. I think the books kind of nailed it with this number. 875.5 seems pretty accurate. A different kind of injury, Brian Robinson, they got his over-under at 800.5. Matt, I'm assuming you probably watch a little bit more of Brian Robinson and myself or Andrew. We got a little bit of a new coaching situation. What do you know about Washington and Brian Robinson? What do you like? 800.5 yards, over or under on this one?
So here's the various things that I'm using to consider him. When you look at last year he had 797 yards and 205 carries. And that was under a different offense. Obviously, Eric Bieniemy coming in, and we'll get to his aspect of this in a moment. But, Brian Robinson was basically used as a guy that they were going to plunge into the line and keep people honest and everything like that. He had 24 carries, 26 carries, 22 carries. They really do enjoy him. And so under the old offense, I would have loved the over here. You look at this new offense with Eric Bieniemy, and I just was going over the Chiefs running backs since 2018 when he was there. And basically, there were 2 guys who went over 800 yards. And so that's a little bit of a concern here because we know Eric Bieniemy is not so much concerned about the running game. He's concerned about getting guys out into space. Sam Howell's the quarterback, so you're going to want to have him do a little bit less. You're going to want to run the ball a little bit more. I think Brian Robinson goes over this ever so slightly. I just think because they don't trust Antonio Gibson to be a guy who takes the ball on a day-to-day basis and goes and has 8 or 9 carries. J.D. McKissick is no longer there. The backups to those guys, Chris Rodriguez, who is the rookie running back out of Kentucky, Jonathan Williams, a guy who's been there for a couple of years, and he's done some things, but not very much. I just think out of necessity, because this is a team that also talked at the end of the year, they want to run the ball. They want to be a team who wins 20-16. They want to win low-scoring games because they've got the defense to keep games low-scoring. I think Brian Robinson, this is one of those things where you're going to take the over, and he's going to have 100, 200 carries, and you're going to be pulling your hair out because he's going to average 3 or 4 yards per carry. He's going to be very ineffective some games. But I think he kind of goes over this. There's nobody else here, and you're not going to have Sam Howell throw the ball 30, 35 games. I think this is a hold your nose over here with Eric Bieniemy there. He's going to get over ever so slightly, despite the fact that he's maybe not very good.
This whole franchise is hold your nose. This roster makes no sense. Andrew, what do you think of Brian Robinson over under 800.5?
Andy, I like this one over. I think this is going to be funny because, first of all, I talked about receiving yards and receptions for the other two guys we talked about, and I feel like this is not the case here for Brian Robinson. He's not somebody that caught the ball very much, not someone that got targeted that much. Why would he need to when they're running him into the ground, when the volume was just so high for him being ranked 4th in carries? And I think Matt made a really good point about Gibson. It's funny because I think if you're talking about fantasy football or making your daily fantasy lineups and things like that, you might be frustrated with Brian Robinson because he might do everything in his power and be a huge part of this team marching the field. And then when it goes to punching it in, he might not be that guy to get in the end zone. He's going to be gathering a few yards per carry, but just get such high volume of opportunities to carry the ball that I think he could get over this number. And, you take a look at what he was able to do once he finally got in. I don't think we've even seen the full display of what he's capable of. I look forward to seeing him healthy. And I think that I understand Matt's talking about the game planning and things, but I don't think he has much competition until we get to the end zone. And in the end zone, all you're doing is talking about touchdown props and fantasy football, not actual rushing yards. So as far as that number one job of getting those consistent carries goes, it's on him. And I like looking over at these numbers. I know some people always say, well, yeah, these numbers are low for a reason. I'm finding myself so far when we've been doing the research for these season-long projections, feeling a lot more comfortable betting the overs on the smaller numbers. And I think for him, he's due for a great season. So I'm looking forward to it. And like I said, the other two running backs, Andy, I expect them to catch the ball quite a bit. And if it's working, usually coaches just keep going to what's working. So that kind of worries me taking these season-long rushing props. But with him, I don't really expect him to be catching the ball very much.
I can't believe this. I think we all agree. I'm going over too. I'm going over as well on this one. I think this number is way too low. Only averaged 3.9 yards a carry. So, he's going to need 200 carries. He played 12 games and had 205. Matt, you mentioned it. I think the J.D. McKissick not being there is a really big deal for this particular prop because Antonio Gibson is going to slide into that role as a pass catcher. So I don't think Antonio Gibson is going to take away a lot of those first and second down runs. He may spell him a little bit here or there, but I think it's a pretty predictable way that they're going to use this backfield. It's going to be Brian Robinson in the shorter yards and on first and second down. And when they get to third and longer where they need a pass catcher, Antonio Gibson is going to be the guy. I think I think he gets well over this 200 carries. Obviously, every prop is like, well, his health, but the injury was about as fluky as it gets. I don't think he has any long-term effects from it. So I think he stays healthy enough to get well over 200 carries and get over this. Actually, Matt, I was going to ask you about this, and Andrew, chime in here. I think Antonio Gibson might be the steal of the year in fantasy football drafts. He's going to get a bunch of catches. We know this. He's not terrible as a running back, and you can grab this guy really, really late. I think Antonio Gibson might be a sleeper in some of these props to start the year, fantasy football. I don't know. I kind of like Antonio Gibson this year. Matt, do you have any opinions on Gibson?
Well, I mean, he got the and look, we obviously when we talk about coaches' quotes, like they don't necessarily mean anything nowadays. But he got a week ago could be a matchup nightmare per Ron Rivera. And you look at some of the things like the creative plays that Eric Bieniemy came up with Kansas City. Now, look, he doesn't have Travis Kelce there, he doesn't have Patrick Mahomes there, but we do know that Eric Bieniemy can scheme up some solid plays, get some guys in one-on-one. And as you just said, the J.D. McKissick role is available, and he kind of filled the J.D. McKissick role last year. I do like Antonio Gibson. Now, he'd have to be in a PPR league, and you'd have to find games that they're going to be in either shootouts or that they're definitely going to be losing in, because when they're winning, I think it's going to be more Brian Robinson. But yeah, I think that Antonio Gibson could be a very sneaky sleeper later on, especially in PPR leagues where he's going to have 5 catches for 25 yards in some games, especially those 2-minute drills. I found that those J.D. McKissick props went over when he was in there for 2-minute drills down the stretch.
Yeah, Andrew, thoughts on Antonio Gibson? Feels like there might be a lot of sneaky little stats out there without McKissick there.
Yeah, I think it's a great point about PPR leagues. If you're drafting him in fantasy football, you probably want him as far as that's concerned. But rushing props, I'm not interested. I think that the guy could have 30 rushing yards on a day and have 2 touchdowns. That's really what I think the projections could be for this guy. They're going to give the ball to him on the 5-yard line. And if I'm Brian Robinson, I'd be like, what the hell, man? I got us here. Give me the ball. Let me score the touchdown. I wouldn't like that if I was a football player, but obviously it's a team game. No, I like that one quite a bit. I think that, where do you think he goes, Andy? Like what round? Like where do you think he goes in fantasy?
I was seeing in mock drafts that you can grab him in the 9th round, 8th or 9th round. It's definitely a PPR. I should say that it's a standard league. I don't think he's got a ton of value, but I play in one of my biggest leagues as a PPR. That's a guy I have circled to take. I might even take him just a little bit earlier to guarantee that I get him. And then, the other thing about taking a guy like Antonio Gibson is if Brian Robinson does get hurt, now you're sitting on a guy that's getting all the touches in there. So yeah, PPR leagues, I like Antonio Gibson, and
Matt,
I would love to get. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
no, go finish, and then I got something to say.
Well, I was gonna say I hope that the books maybe don't quite catch on, and maybe the first couple weeks we get a number in the receptions with Gibson, like what 2.5, 3.5. I would feel okay, but maybe the books are being a little cautious with somebody like Antonio Gibson. Oh, he's not starting. We don't really know what his role is, and maybe they throw out a over 2.5 receptions and maybe call it minus 135. I would take that all day long on someone like Antonio Gibson flying under the radar in the books. Maybe give us some soft lines to start the year.
2 things. One, maybe not so much week 1 against the Cardinals, because the Cardinals are going to be so bad. It could be a Brian Robinson game, like Brian Robinson touchdown probably could be against the. I mean, everybody, you two could score a touchdown against the Cardinals. 2, there were the reports like last week that they were looking at Kareem Hunt. Now that would certainly change things a little bit for everything, but Josina Anderson, I think, had a tweet that they were looking at Kareem Hunt, who's still out there. If he joins the fold, then we've got, I'm staying away from pretty much everybody, because we know Hunt is the guy who usually catches the ball, and that would kind of push everybody around.
Yeah, oh man, that would be talk about fantasy nightmare. Oh my gosh, that would it would crush Kareem Hunt's value, yeah, all that stuff. So great stuff. All right, guys, let's jump into Matt. Let's go to you and let's do some MLB props, K props. How's baseball been going? Tell us what you noticed, some teams, some trends, anything that you've picked up over the last week in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, and approaching the All-Star break, which is always good when you're handicapping baseball on a day-to-day basis. You always enjoy the All-Star break as a time to kind of get away from everything. But here's 4 trends I'm kind of looking at right now when it comes to Major League Baseball. My beloved Phillies, who I don't even want to claim anymore, it feels like, they've gone over in 10 straight of their K-props. And this is the lineup that we kind of figure was always going to be there. They strike out a lot. Kyle Schwarber is usually good for 1 or 2. Nick Castellanos is good for 1 or 2. JT Realmuto, Trey Turner, all these guys are good for 1 or 2. Here's the interesting thing. Now with this 10-game streak, they're now even 35 overs, 35 unders. So I thought that was really interesting. The Phillies were an under team, and I think we talked about it either last week or 2 weeks ago. I didn't trust them as an under team, and now their numbers are starting to show that they're more of an over team. On the opposite side, the Washington Nationals, 15 of their last 20 games, they've gone under their K-prop. Now 47 unders, 26 overs. Hint, hint. I may like Musgrove under 5.5 strikeouts today for the San Diego Padres. That may be a client play. Colorado's back home tonight. Andy knows, you guys have known we talked a lot last year about K-props in Colorado and Coors Field. Nothing really sticking out this year. Colorado does have the number 1 K rate overall against lefties this season. They've only gone over 18 of their 34 times at Coors Field, though. So there's no real trend to play here. 18 overs, 16 unders in Coors Field for the Rockies. Patrick Sandoval going for the Angels tonight, so it'll be interesting to see if he can rack up the strikeouts. And then finally, the Houston Astros. We talked about it. They were struggling mightily when it came to K-props this year. They had a lot of overs. Well, 18 of their last 25 have gone under here, so the Astros are starting to return to the form they had last year where they just didn't strike out a lot. Now they have 40 unders to 30 overs overall. So Houston, a team now you may want to flip a little bit and start looking at their unders when earlier on you were looking at their overs with regards to their K-props.
Great work from Matt Joseph. You can grab all of his MLB props and picks at sportsmemo.com. I'm going to go over a little bit of UFC props. I think there are some fairly interesting ones. I've been monitoring closely the spreads. If you've noticed, UFC has now put out +3.5 or -3.5. If you don't know what the spreads are in UFC, it's pretty simple. It's just the totals on the judges' scorecards. So if a fighter wins 29-28, 29-28, 29-28, he won by 3 points. So if you had him at -3.5, you lose that bet. I think you're finding real value in the +3.5. You're trying to look for fights that you think are going to be close, and you're trying to look for fighters that you think can steal around. So a couple spreads that I like. The Jamal Emmers and Jack Jenkins fight, you can get Jack Jenkins at +3.5 at -130. Jenkins comes from a really good Australian league. He's really tough. And Jamal Emmers is pretty athletic, but Jenkins has a really, really smart camp. His in-fight IQ is through the roof, and he's got some devastating leg kicks. If he can land some of those leg kicks early and soften them up, I think he can make this a really close fight. I think he's a live dog to well. I think Emmers takes the win, but if it in a really close fight, I would love to be holding a Jack Jenkins +3.5 ticket. Couple unders, the Trevor Peak and Jose Mariscal. That fight to not go the distance is like the bet of the millennium. It's really juicy for a reason, but these guys are going to come out and try and knock each other's head off, and both of them have the power to do it. Don't blink in that fight. It is going to be insane. Trevor Peak's story, his life story is really fascinating, but man, he comes out with intentions to knock someone's head off. Andrew, I don't know if you heard the last fight about Trevor Peak. He won a bonus for knockout of the night, and he was like, "Thank God I won that, man. I already got 2 jobs. I was getting ready to apply for a third, and now I don't have to apply for the third job." It's like, oh my God, Trevor Peak, calm down.
I want to know anybody that's betting unders this weekend, really, in the UFC. Like, let me know if you're betting overs. Like, I want to know anyone that's betting fights to go the distance, especially late in that main card, Andy. You got to have stones to be doing that. There's gonna be brawls this weekend.
It's going to be brawls. The only one that I think you can safely take an over on is the Neil Magny Phil Rowe. It's, what is it? Death, taxes, and Neil Magny by decision. Neil Magny's fights just always go. But other than that, yeah, you're just looking at really, really good fights across the board. So Peak and Mariscal to not go the distance, and you can put that with Cody Brundage and Cedric Dumas to not go the distance. I'm surprised that fight is still on. Andrew, Cedric Dumas, not the brightest bulb. He did an interview where he was like, "Yeah, my knees hurt." It's like, dude, you shouldn't tell everybody that you're injured going into a fight. You can't do that, man. So Brundage has no gas tank after 1.5 rounds. Dumas has no gas tank after 1.5 rounds. These guys are going to try and finish each other early. So those are some props in the UFC that I think we have for it this weekend. Andrew, nice cash in CFL last night. You took the 6 points. You didn't need them at all. But talk to us a little bit about CFL, what we saw from last week, maybe from last night, and what's some player props before we get to our best bet.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Always nice when the game plan goes as expected, but I can't say I saw it going that well. But we'll take it. Look, I mean, A lot of people say in the NFL, week 2 is overreaction week. I would describe, I think, week 3 in the CFL is probably overreaction week, where you gather 2 weeks of information. Everybody falls in love with one team or player. And that's kind of when you want to look the opposite direction. But there's an interesting story tonight in the CFL. And I have a bet later on in the show I'm going to give that most people should be able to get down on. It's a touchdown scorer prop. But just in general, talking about tonight's game featuring Hamilton and Montreal, we have an injury situation with Hamilton. Their quarterback, Bo Levi Mitchell, he's out for a few weeks now, and in comes Matthew Schultz. Now, here's the deal. In week 1, Bo Levi Mitchell was averaging the farthest distance per pass in the entire league, just 1 week, but he was slinging the ball quite a bit. Now you go from Mitchell to Schultz, and I don't think it's really a knock on Schultz's game, but I just think that they're going to have to change the style of the Hamilton offense with him behind center. You know, when he came in replace of Mitchell last week, guys, we saw a lot shorter passes. It was check down after check down after check down, but he marched the field. He got the job done, and he let his receivers do the work. And I feel like, honestly, that's kind of what Hamilton was missing. So what I'm looking at is a lot of reception props tonight for the Hamilton Tiger Cat receivers, maybe a little bit less on the receiving yards. I think it's going to be really distributed, really spread out. But looking at the reception numbers for some of these guys over their totals, if you guys can get that down. And I'm looking at some rushing yard props as well. If you can find Matthew Schultz, the quarterback, his rushing yard number should be pretty good as well. But we've got Stanback and Butler, the top guys on both these clubs. Would not shock me to see the number go over on both teams. I talked about overreactions. Hamilton's been burnt in the secondary both games they've played so far. But I think their strategy this game is going to be simple. Run the ball into the ground, keep possession, and really keep Montreal's defense on the field. If they do that, I don't think Montreal quarterback Cody Fajardo will have the opportunity to throw the ball and go as deep as he usually does. Now, Montreal's coming off a game in week 1. They had a bye last week. They played Ottawa. Ottawa stinks. They're one of the worst teams in the league. So I talk about overreaction. Well, any prop or any stats that you're basing, Montreal tonight off of week 1, you're going to miss on, because you're pretty much talking about this team that played well and put up these big numbers and did so well against a bottom feeder. So when we're talking about these season-long projections, or when we're here on Prop It Up each Friday talking about players, it's really important. And I'm going to really stress that this year on Fridays when we're talking about the NFL. When I talk about, well, the last 3 out of 4 games, this guy did this or this guy did that, because I am a big streaks guy in the NFL. But I'm going to start announcing who that player did this against. I think it's very important when you're handicapping. So unders, receptions over yards tonight in the CFL, and looking forward to cashing some rushing yard tickets. So do with that as you will. But as far as the Hamilton Tiger Cats go, their offense will be different tonight than it was just last week with a new quarterback behind center.
Yeah, the injuries, if they pop up all the time in Canadian football, and if you're not looking out for it, good Lord, to make a huge difference. I feel like it's such a big story in NFL, like when there's a quarterback injury, that's all you hear about. But in CFL, you have to search a little bit for some of those. So, Adrian, we're going to come back to you in a second for our best bet. Matt, tell everyone what you have up for this weekend and where we can find you at.
Yeah, it's baseball, pretty much for the time being. But the college football research is continuing to be done. Looking forward to that. And the fine folks have done a deal for you. If you want to go and check out my college football season package, it is reduced greatly at a very nice price, $399 for up over 150 units the last 3 seasons. Number 1 Sports Memo. Don't know if that equates over to WagerTalk as well, but number 1 at Sports Memo. College football less than 70 days away. So looking forward to that as the research continues.
That's amazing, man. Over 152 units last 3 years. Congratulations on that. I know researching all of, I can't imagine how much time and work that puts in, but we appreciate it. And the results speak for themselves. So great work, Matt. What an incredible number. We're going to get to Andrew for his best bet. You can use a promo code for myself, Andy3, ANDY3. Get you a 3-day pass for $39. We do this every Friday, and it's been going really, really well. We brought in 12.1 units last weekend, 5.7 the weekend before that, and 22.5 the weekend before that. So weekends seem to be working out really well. Just our bread and butter sports. We have golf, we have UFC, we have Major League Baseball. We're on a incredible run in Major League Baseball in June. So you want to get all the plays, just use the promo code ANDY3, ANDY3. Get you all plays, including the 5% that we have in UFC. All right, Andrew, you are up for best bet. First off, tell everyone what you have up for this weekend, where we can find you at, and then let's give out your best bet.
Yeah, fresh off a 4% best bet winner yesterday in the CFL. So riding a 14-6 CFL best bet run. And of course, that does date back to last season. I do have a 5% play that goes Saturday night. You can use the promo code SAVE20. Pretty self-explanatory. You can save $20. Take $20 off there, get that down to just $15. And I took a break from the UFC last weekend, but I'm certainly back in action this Saturday. Looking forward to the card. And guys, for the best bet, keeping it very simple. As far as the CFL is concerned, I'm going to a prop. Most people should be able to get down on at least a touchdown score. That's at least what I've been told. Most books do offer those, maybe not the rushing and receiving props. But my free play of the week was Hamilton to win the game, and I'll announce that right now. But I'm looking at James Butler, running back for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, to get in the end zone, to get a touchdown. They played 2 games so far this year. He has at least won in both of those games with a new quarterback at the helm here for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. They're 0-2, playing their first game at home. This is a huge game for Hamilton. They're going to really try and take care of the ball well, put the ball in Butler's hands a ton of times. He'll get a lot of carries. And when they're in the red zone, they're going to trust him to get them in there and capitalize and get a touchdown. So it's not a great price. It's plus 100, guys. But we're going to get in and cash this ticket. James Butler to score a touchdown tonight.
Great work, Andrew McGinnis at WagerTalk.com. Let's cash our player prop in the CFL for this week. Shout out to everybody in the chat room. You all know who you are. Don't forget to give us a comment as to a player that you'd like us to break down their season totals next week. Could be any position. Just let us know in the comments. Make sure it's in the comments, not in the chat, so we can see it. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Andrew. Let's have another profitable weekend, guys. We'll see everyone next Friday on Prop It Up.